Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of Sports Spectrum is brought to you by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. It's almost that time, that Christmas time, and you're trying to figure out how can we give back? How can we help someone in need? How can we provide someone with hope? And the holiday season really gets that cranking around in our brain. And I think Compassion International is a great place to start. We're talking about $38 a month, tax deductible, and an opportunity to release a child from poverty. Kids all over the world waiting to be released from poverty. What that $38 does is provides food, education, medical care, vocational training. It's all done in the name of Jesus. That's the most important part. And it provides a child with something that every child in this world deserves, and that is hope. Make a difference in a child's life. Sponsor them through Compassion International. Check out the website, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and pray about releasing a child from poverty today. Before we get to our conversation with Jason Hanson, longtime Detroit Lions kicker, I want to tell you about something brand new that's coming your way from the producers of Sports Spectrum, and it's called the Football Sunday Podcast. It releases Monday, December 16th, and we're really excited. You can actually subscribe right now and hear a sort of teaser trailer about what this Football Sunday Podcast is going to be like. You can even hear a couple clips from these podcast releases. And the real cool thing about this podcast, again, Football Sunday Podcast, is its first-person stories from current and former NFL players on how God has worked and moved in their life. So it's not me interviewing them like we do on Sports Spectrum. This is the athlete, the football player themselves telling their story of God working in their life. People like Trent Dilfer and Brandon Marshall and Drew Brees. That's going to be Monday, December 16th. The first 3 episodes that are releasing are going to be personalized conversations with Drew Brees, Brandon Marshall, and Trent Dilfer. And then you're going to hear from guys like Kirk Cousins, Thomas Davis, Josh McCown, Benjamin Watson, Matt Hasselbeck, names that are very familiar if you know the NFL, and these guys all love Jesus. And we were fortunate to get them to share their story, their God story, in a personalized way. So really excited about this. Subscribe today. Just search Football Sunday Podcast. We'll also put a link to it in the show notes. But subscribe so you never miss an episode. It's going to be 12 episodes. It's just going to be a 12-episode series over an 8-week period ending on the Monday after the Super Bowl, February 3rd. And it's called Football Sunday Podcast. Subscribe today. I think you're going to love it. Today on Sports Spectrum's podcast, we're really excited to welcome Jason Hanson, the former Detroit Lions kicker. And you might think, okay, I remember Jason when he played. How long did he play for? How about 21 seasons? 21 years in the NFL from 1992 to 2012. And how about 21 seasons with the same team? 21 years with the Detroit Lions as their kicker. And when you go way back to 1992, he was selected in the second round, pick number 56 overall by the Lions. And you can go back and look and say, okay, the Lions made a mistake there picking a kicker with a second round pick. Well, when you got that guy for 21 years as your kicker, I'd say they hit the nail on the head, for lack of a better word, with the selection of Jason Hanson. He would go on, like I said, to a 21-year career. He was Offensive Rookie of the Year by Pro Football Weekly in 1992, a 2-time Pro Bowler in 1997 and 1999. He's currently 4th on the NFL's all-time points scored career leaders list with 2,150. He holds multiple NFL records, including most field goals of 40 yards or more, most consecutive field goals of 40 or more yards, and most career games with one NFL team, 327 games with one team, and most career seasons with one team, like we mentioned, 21. In April of 2013, Jason announced his retirement from the NFL at the age of 42, and in the fall of 2013 was inducted into the Detroit Lions Ring of Honor at Ford Field. Jason Hanson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. Take a listen to our fun conversation about football and faith with Jason Hanson. Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Jay, you got a great first name. First of all, that's what we can start with there. But 21 years in the NFL, and it's not often that we talk to people who have played that long in any sport, certainly, and certainly not playing that long with one team, which is such an anomaly. You've actually been out of the game now for 7 years, which is kind of crazy. Last playing in 2012. I just wonder for you, how often each day do you think about your playing career? It's obviously a huge part of your journey, but having been removed now for 6-7 years, I'm sure you're reminded of it every day by different people in your life, even by this conversation of us talking. But how often do you actually think about your playing career?
Yeah, it's interesting. I live in Detroit still, and so especially during the football season, I'm constantly reminded about it. I have a little bit of connection with the Lions still. Nothing on the football side, but myself and some of the other guys that have been around do some community things with them. And even during the football season, we'll head down to the games once in a while and do some, game day signings or appearances. And through all of that, I guess what I'm saying is I haven't really got away from them. I'm still here and still connected to Detroit and the team a little bit. So I probably think about it more than I want to. I probably, all right, I'm done with it, 7 years, let's move on. But I still have a connection with it by still living in the community which I played in.
By living in Detroit, and obviously it's been, a few years since you played, you're still around the game doing community stuff, but I'm guessing you can go to the grocery store and the mall and kind of live somewhat of a normal life, even though you played for 21 years with the same team. Is that the case, or is that something that you still get stopped here and there with people recognizing you?
Yeah, it's in between. I think, living in the community, Detroit area, that, people will recognize who you are, but still there's a good amount of anonymity, right? I was a kicker. So
yeah.
You meet people in the store or out in the street, and they'll look at you and they sense there's something familiar about your face, and someone will stop you and be like, do I know you? And, I know what they're asking. They've seen me because of football, but they can't place it because the body doesn't match,
right.
Football player. And so they're always, did I go to school with you? Did I work with you? And, the guy, just the other day, a guy was like, do you do stocks? I don't know, like what? But, so that happens quite a bit of some general familiarity. But again, if I was 300 pounds, they probably would connect it all together. But being 180 pounds and looking like a school principal, I suppose, doesn't help matters. But it's good. It's good. The guys that, the Barry Sanders and people like that are, just, they can't go out in public without everybody knowing who they are. So I enjoy just being, normal dad guy out on the street.
Jason Hanson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. When did you realize that you were pretty good at this kicking thing? I mean, you got drafted in the second round, which is very high for a kicker, whether it was in 1992 or today. You just don't see that too often, that high of a draft pick being put on a kicker. So obviously you were doing something right and you had a great career in college. But at what point did you realize you were pretty good at this kicking thing and it might be something you want to pursue?
Yeah, it's something that I always could do. I grew up loving soccer, playing soccer, and enjoyed that. But I always seemed to be able to kick a ball well. That was just something that I guess you say it was a gift God gave me. It was just something that made sense and the timing. Anyway, so I always could do that. And in high school out west, where I'm from, Washington State, boys soccer is in the spring. Whereas let's take like Detroit, and I think a large part of the country, boys soccer is in the fall. So that would conflict with football season. Well, for me, they were separate seasons. And so when I got to high school, all my buddies were football players and wanted me to, they said, toughen up and come play some, real tough sport, football. And my fall was free, so I tried it. And I knew how to kick back. Walked into my first meeting and saw the plays on the board and was like, what's this? And thought, I'm just going to kick. That's how I got into it. It's just my playing football with my friends and kicking's what I knew how to do. And that was the talent I had. The only thing I could probably do in football, right, with my size. But it was God's plan was to do that.
Do you remember your first NFL field goal, maybe the emotions that centered around that, your sort of welcome to the NFL moment? Because you got picked in 1992 and you came to a team that was a pretty good team in 1991, went all the way to the NFC Championship game, and Barry Sanders is just kind of coming into his own as, in his third year, fourth year as one of the great running backs of all time. And here comes Jason Hanson, the second rounder, taken by the Lions. Tell me about maybe those welcome to the NFL moments for you and even your first NFL field goal.
I do remember my first NFL field goal, although it was a long time ago. We played the Chicago Bears. Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback. We're at Soldier Field.
Yeah.
And I remember out there for our field goal, we used to kind of huddle briefly before we kick. And there might even have been a timeout or some delay because it seemed like we were in the huddle. And next thing I know, Richard Dent is standing in our huddle from the Bears. And he was kind of mouthing off, and the guys were pushing him, "Get out of here!" And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Pay attention, pay attention to the field goal." He's just like, "What's going on?" And so, I think I made it, but Harbaugh got us on a last-second drive that day. But yeah, I just remember that, and that was the start of the career.
Oh, that's crazy. I love stories like that. And, when you play 21 years, I'm sure you got, tons and tons and tons of stories. But that rookie year, when you think back to that first year and sort of, 22 years old, eyes wide open. I mean, you play 21 years, so they all kind of might fold into each other a little bit. But that rookie year, what was that like acclimating yourself to the business side and the NFL side of football and professional football now, where it's just a different animal?
Well, I mean, I think you said it. You're just you feel like a man. You're in the NFL, but looking back, I was just a kid, and you're just kind of doing your job, and maybe a little bit of a blur. In fact, even as I'm telling you about that field goal, I'm thinking, was that really the first one? I think it is. I can't. I knew it was right at the start. I think it's the first field goal. But it's like they all were together. You get into the NFL, and at that stage, I was just make the field goals and. You just did what was right in front of you, and the big picture wasn't a big picture yet. It was just, I'm kicking in the NFL and doing it. And, you go from that wide eye, just kind of a blur, to by the end of my career, right, you've been in the league, you fully know the implications of every kick and the pressure and what's expected and what isn't. And, the NFL during my career was always a big deal, but it just exponentially became bigger and bigger, and money became bigger and bigger, and every kick became a huge deal. And that's not to say it wasn't before me, but certainly everything just began to really grow leaps and bounds with the hype and the enormity of what the NFL meant to our culture. It's happened, in the trajectory of my career.
Jason Hanson's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. We intersect the world of sports and faith on this show. So let's intersect your journey with faith. Tell us about your faith walk with Christ, maybe your testimony, and how that journey began for you.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a Christian home, and I think at some point, I don't remember the exact moment, but I knew that this faith, this church thing that we were doing and learning about Jesus God was calling that to be my faith. And that I now joke, that it wasn't a family pass like to the amusement park where, one ticket gets everybody in. It was like I needed my own. And that, God was calling me to know him and to put my faith in Christ. And so I don't know I think junior high, roughly around that time, I think it was real and it became mine. I look back at that time, and certainly a lot of, oh my goodness, it's like, what was I thinking when I did these things? And so there was a lot of growth needed, but I really began to grow in college and with football. I think as I got to college, the decisions that everybody faces, right? Of, well, do I really believe this? And why am I not going to do this at college? And why am I going to go to church? And just normal life decisions where I became more convinced of like, no, I believe this is real. But football was a huge part of that, of having success and performing well and getting some accolades and fame. And, actually kind of finding out through that, wow, I'm getting all this attention and these rewards and kind of getting some of the best of what life culture has to offer, and being able to see that, wow, it really isn't, it's fun, but boy, I sure don't want to put my hope in this. what if I miss? What if I play bad? And just so being able to see how temporary all that was and how shallow that's my testimony as far as from there till now, the process of being convinced through sports that, what the Bible was saying about Jesus is true, that there's no peace apart from him. And any of this that I found in the NFL as awesome and fun as it was. And we've been blessed because of it. Man, there is no hope in any of that apart from Christ. And for me, it was a process of becoming convinced that what I knew, it was true, that Jesus is who he said he is, and that my faith in him was well placed and the only right thing to do, because he's the Lord.
So as you come into the NFL, and like I said, second round pick, which you just don't hear too often, and that's a pretty much a huge, kudos to you, and certainly kudos to the Lions when you end up being their kicker for 21 seasons. That means they got that pick right, which is pretty cool. But you also came into the league. You were married to Kathleen, I believe, in '92, which would have been right before your rookie year. And so Now you have this newfound faith, this newfound life as a husband, and also this newfound life as a football player. So tell me about we talked about that rookie year and sort of what that was like from acclimating yourself to that, but talk about your faith a little bit and, certainly being married and the temptations that come from being an NFL player, just traveling and all the different things that come at you. What was that like trying to carry that faith into the league? Was there any hesitation, any disruptions, anything that kind of pulled at you a little bit that maybe was a challenge for you to keep that faith, or was the NFL pretty open and willing to have you walk in, not just you, but any player, and be able to live that faith out?
I think that last part, for me, the biggest challenge, and it happens right away, is you're in the NFL, you've been successful, you've been drafted, you're a player that's, had accolades and awards and that's how you got there is I guess the biggest challenge to faith is to believe that I'm a big deal, hey, I'm a pretty big deal. I'm in the NFL and I'm this and that. And, again, that challenge of, Jesus is great, but I think I have this under control. I'm doing pretty good on my own mentality was the biggest challenge of I just call it believing the hype. And, I have a wonderful wife who was great at helping me not believe the hype in a good way, just, who loved me not because of what was going on in the field but because of, her love for me off the field and our faith that we shared together. And so my family was a huge part of being able to stay, I guess you could say, grounded, but, focus on what really matters. And, another thing that was great was, the Lions had a team chaplain, and, he wasn't employed by the team. It wasn't necessarily a team of Detroit Lions position, yet he was someone who came here, and his ministry was professional athletes. His name was Dave Wilson, and was a huge influence on my life as far as, and other guys, of keeping us focused and having Bible studies and chapel services. And his story, again, so he got access to the team. But because I think he was a great guy, he was loved by everybody, and the organization saw the value, they gave him access to the team. I think that's how it happens across the league for the most part is, teams give access and allow a chaplain to come in and do services. Well, Dave did that for us with my whole career. He and his wife, Ann, who now are on Family Life radio and are national marriage speakers. They have a book and they have a huge ministry. Well, I was under him for, my 21-year career, and they invested in us. And so that was a huge part of staying faithful. And, there's all kinds of temptations in football, that come with any kind of success anywhere. You can have what you want. People want to be around you. Like you said, you're on the road, and that wasn't a huge temptation, but you can just do what you want. There's not a lot of barriers. And all of that was great to help keep me, again, focused on what matters and keeping my eyes on what truly lasts, and not get too caught up in the lifestyle that, an NFL career can give you.
Yeah, Dave and Ann Wilson were on this podcast back in, I think, January when their book came out on marriage, and Vertical Marriage, I think, is the name of the book for those listening. It was a fantastic book. They're a great couple, and we got to know them through our ministry with Sports Spectrum and Pro Athletes Outreach, and we love them. But I wonder for you, as you got older, 21 years, and Dave and Ann were certainly, I'm sure Dave was, continued to be an amazing chaplain for you, but I'm guessing that your role starts to change a little bit. You go from the rookie, the wide-eyed kid trying to prove himself as a high draft pick to 10 years, let's say, and you're in your early 30s, and suddenly, this is an established guy who knows how to do his job right. And maybe your role is starting to change from a spiritual perspective too. Can you talk about that and kind of how that developed over your 20-year career?
Yeah, I think, in the NFL especially, and probably, again, any career anywhere this happens, but, veterans get a special status, guys that have been in the league and done it, getting the respect of their teammates in the league. And even as a kicker, right, you're so different than everything else. Just by doing it in the league and showing up and working hard at practice, you gain the respect and credibility in your teammates' eyes. And so, spiritually as well, the chance to be able to participating in chapels and Bible studies and invest in the guys and then become a spiritual, leader as well. And being able to influence and help mature guys and being a part of all that. So yeah, definitely not only do you get the credibility and with athletically, of what it takes to work in the league and survive in the league, but also if you say something to guys about spiritual matters, you have some credibility as well. And so, that was, again, in a way, there's nothing unique about that. That's what we're all called to do as you grow and you begin to invest and disciple in others and become a leader spiritually as well as you mature. It happened in the NFL. And, it was a great experience. And the NFL is a different thing too, where there was some years where the Lions the team I played for, were really bad. I mean, really bad. And so there was a lot of turnover. So 2-3 years later, after a season, I may only know a few guys on the team anymore, maybe 10 guys or 5 guys out of 55 guys. And so there was a lot of turnover, and the ability to do friendships and life with people sometimes was hard because you were only with people for a couple of years at a time. But all that uniqueness though was interesting, and got to meet a lot of guys, and a lot of guys came through, and again, just a different experience, but it was one that God had for me.
You talked about that turnover. That didn't happen for you. 21 seasons with the same team. It's just unheard of, really, in any sport, but definitely in the NFL, which is that not for long mantra. So how does that happen? Were there moments for you, Jay, where you thought, oh, I'm out of here, or maybe even free agency or an opportunity to leave came and you just decided to stay? What was that like? Share with us maybe just, the decision, really, because it becomes your decision as much as it is the Lions' decision to keep you. It's your decision too, and that's 21 years with the same team. You just don't see that nowadays.
Yeah, for my career, I think it just developed where I was fine with staying. I valued being in the same place and having that for my family, but also the routine for me. And the Lions were wanted me to stay. I think teams would love to not think about their kicker, right? If you get someone who you think can do it, they would love to just have that in the bag and move on to the important thing for football, right? And so I think they were happy to have a kicker that they felt like they could trust. And so for the bulk of my career, a lot of the contracts were done like a year early and like, hey, let's just get this done. And weren't a huge deal. By the end, as I got older, and at the end I had a couple injuries. And so it was a little more, no, there's no drama, but just, okay, wait till the end. Let's make sure we want to do this. But by the last half of my career, or last third of my career, even when it probably could have been like, okay, should we do something different? I valued staying. In the back of my mind, I thought it would be great to this team that I'd spent so much time with and given so much for. It would be the most rewarding to finish and to maybe, turn it around in Detroit because we were bad and be part of that success and experience success. I thought that would be great. It didn't really happen. But that's, it's just the way it goes. But all those factors, I think, went into why I stuck with Detroit and was glad to play all of my career in one place.
So what do you think is the biggest lesson you learned going from maybe year 1 to year 21 in just this NFL journey? Let's say a kicker's getting ready to come into the NFL, or even a first or second year guy is talking to Jason Hanson and says, man, give me something. Give me the lesson that you learned from your career, from the time you got in to the time that you left and retired, that sticks with you. What would you say?
Don't lose. Losing stinks. Losing is bad. When you're in sports, losing is not good. I'm kind of kidding, but no, I mean, once that's true. We had a big stretch of losing, and it is terrible to continually lose in a sport as intense as football with so few games. And but on a slightly more serious side, I just think what I learned for me is kind of inherent in the job that I do, but when you become a professional, the game is fun, but it's more than fun. It's a job, and it's something that you become a pro at. And so I think routine and discipline for me was a big part of learning how to be successful and lasting. Is just to do those things, to be disciplined. Nike had that catchphrase years ago, just do it, where you sometimes, you don't feel like it, but man, this is what I'm supposed to do. The way that I work, and God's given me a great opportunity to be here. Even if we've lost 8 in a row, show up this week and just do it. Here's what you do. You do your routine the best that you know how to do. And obviously as a kicker, that's my whole life, is a routine of stepping on the field and doing the same thing over and over. But a lot of times routine saved me when it was hard, when it wasn't fun, or when losing was just a weight on everybody in the organization. That helped. Routine and the discipline to do it of over and over and year after year. I think that's for anybody that's professional. It's one of the things you learn is you don't wing it anymore. You become a pro and you do it right, and you do it right every time, and you make yourself do it right. So I think those things come to the top of my head, as far as things I've learned.
Last couple questions here with Jason Hanson on the Sports Spectrum podcast. So you announced your retirement April 4th, 2013. You were 42, getting ready to turn 43. What was it about that moment that made you decide it's time? It's time? Because you see a guy like Vinatieri, he's 46. You see a lot of kickers go and continue to kick into their mid to late 40s. What was it about you at 42 that just said, you know what, it's time to walk away?
Yeah, it's a good question, because, sometimes I think, man, I think I could still do it. And if you don't have to kick off a ton, I think you could see someone, Vinatieri's doing it. You could see late 40s. I wouldn't be surprised, someone gets close to 50 if you're just doing the field goals. For me, it was everything. And it was a really hard decision. I was desperate for God to give me drop the letter in the mailbox. The resignation letter that told me this is the time, or a neon sign that said this is what to do. But I didn't get it, and was praying hard and really wanting to know, because I felt like I could maybe do it some more, but something inside of me was like having a hard time getting up the energy and the motivation to do it again. And when I say do it again, I'd finished my last year, and this is where the convergence of all these factors came. It was one of the few years where my contract was up, didn't sign early. So it was coming to the early spring with free agency. And so I was done with my contract. That season, I had played most of the season with plantar fasciitis in my left heel, which before that, I used to thought these things with itis at the end of the name, right, were just, it meant you're sore. Fasciitis meant you're a little sore. Well, it was pain. It was literal pain. And my foot that I planted with every time to kick, that hadn't fully gone away. So I was still kind of hurting from that. And, just thinking, can I do this again? And all of those things kind of weighed on me to finally where I felt like God was leading me to like, hey, it's time to be done. If I had been under contract, I probably would have been, hey, I got to play. I mean, no problem. And gone into the training room and tried to get healthy and gone for it again. And, but all this came together, and it was a really difficult decision. But I think it was good. I'd actually kicked well for the most part my last year. And so to go out kicking at a high level something that I can appreciate, even if I was sometimes second guessing, like, wow, I think I could have played more. I think it was God's timing. Even as I did it, and it wasn't sure. I think it was the right time.
Did you get any calls though after retirement? Hey, Jay, can you come back? Or how you feeling? Was there any moments like that, or was it pretty much once it was done, it was done?
I did for a little bit. I did get a few calls, and I felt like, wow, if I wanted to play, I think I would have resigned. And I thought for a little bit, but then I personally was a little nervous. Had really not kicked the ball once I decided to stop. To then, step into, those calls come mid-season when somebody's kicker isn't doing well or they want to upgrade. They're getting ready for the playoffs. I was thinking, that would be fun. But at the same time, one of the ways that I tried to stay on top of my game was I prepared hard in the off season and did all the work, and to just kind of come cold into a season I was nervous to do. So turned them all down. And after a year or two, then people stopped calling.
Jason, you mentioned that losing, and it was kind of half joking, but I get it. Like I know that's got to be hard to be on teams that struggle, for a good part of your career. And, my brother, I told him I would mention his name, Damien, is a huge Lions fan. It goes back to Barry Sanders. And I have another buddy of mine named Paul, who's a huge fan, goes to our church and is involved in leadership there. And his kids love the Lions. And I always say, if you're a Lions fan, you're a true fan, because
you're not a fly-by-night fan.
That's correct. You're not a Super Bowl, 5 Super Bowls like the Patriots, and all of a sudden you find a lot of, sort of those fair weather fans. So I'm just asking you to put on your encouragement hat, Jay, and just provide that encouragement for Lion fans out there who are waiting and hoping, for consistent winning, for a Super Bowl, all of that someday. Give them some encouragement.
Oh man, have you seen the Lions right now? They're struggling. We've done that year after year of encouragement, and so it's everybody's a little jaded with this encouragement. But I would say this about the team: it's really sad that there are a lot of great people in the organization, and there's been a lot of good players, and there's a lot of great things that people just could care less about because the product just seems to never be that elite product on the field. And I even defend the Ford family, who take a lot of heat, obviously, as the owners,
sure,
with a franchise that has not done well these last, especially last couple, 2-3 decades. And, but they've tried. I mean, I think of some of the things they did that didn't even work. Seems to me they've done everything from coaches to switching. Now we're doing the New England kind of protocol, brought in a general manager and a head coach from New England because, there's no machine in the NFL like New England, and trying to replicate, and there's still a little spin in the tires coming out of the gate. And so I just know this. I know there's some good people in the organization. I know that people are working hard. People care. And it feels like it's close. So there's the encouragement. But I also share the grief with everybody. And I can share it because I was part of it. I wasn't above it. That, man, we just want to see, like every sports team, we'd love to see a team get out there and be one of those teams that was the team to beat and the team that people feared. And it's a hard thing. It's a funny thing how franchises and teams can get that or not have it, to lose it. And the Lions need to find it. I really hope that they do.
Jason, this has been great. I really appreciate the time that you spent with us here on the podcast. Last question, and we ask this to all of our guests, where you are today. And I think you can even answer the question of, what you're doing today as, 6 years, 7 years out of the NFL. But what is the Lord showing you? What is he teaching you in the season of life that you're in right now? What are you learning from God?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. I think learning that how merciful God is. One of the things I always talk about when I have a chance to speak is how pro athletes need a savior too. We all need a savior, and that includes pro athletes. Nobody's exempt. The guys that are on high definition on TV and living the life large and really we're our culture's heroes. Sports is. In fact, I just saw someone say the other day that sports is really America's true religion. And, sadly, that's kind of true. But these heroes of ours, man, I need a savior. They need a savior as much as anybody. And to find out, how merciful God is, and looking at who I am and how much God has done for me and blessed me. The biggest blessing is, man, he forgives me. He forgives me for who I am. And after all these years, the ways that I still cling to selfishness and, I said, believe the hype, but you're a former athlete. You still talk about yourself all the time, and there's still the temptation to believe it. And, God should at this point be like, how many times have I told you to just let it go? And he's merciful to me, and he's good. And so I think just, that I get a chance to do some speaking and active at our church. And, I think the other thing I would just say is God, and he is doing stuff, whether I'm in the limelight and playing football and quote unquote famous and right in the thick of it, or whether, I'm not playing anymore and I'm not on the field and I'm never going to be what that was for that period of time. Well, whatever I'm doing now, he's the same God. He's doing things with me and my family, wherever we are, whatever phase of life I am. And, just that he's totally trustworthy and merciful. And so among the hundreds of things that I'm learning about the God who is real, that's probably on the forefront right now.
So lastly, are you going to write a book someday? Because 21 seasons, I think there's a lot of stories there. I bet you a lot of people would love to read a book by Jason Hanson. Has anybody ever broached you about that?
That's funny. I just recently, a couple stories just came full circle from the NFL. They're take a long time to explain, but and I was talking to some people and reminiscing and thinking, man, I was a fly on the wall for a lot of stories as a kicker and have quite a few. And I enjoy the privacy of not sharing every story with people, but there's also enough in there that I might have to leak a few out someday of just some comedy that happened, while you're there in a locker room. I mean, it's a locker room of guys. We're supposedly adults, but basically just a bunch of adolescents and and just the things that happened in my career. And it might be kind of fun to do someday. I do enjoy privacy though, and so I have that pulling at me just to kind of keep quiet about them. But we'll see. It was an amazing ride, and was thankful that I got to do it.
I completely understand that. Jason Hanson, this has been great. Thank you so much for being here and being willing to come out of that privacy a little bit and share about some of your story, both from a football perspective, but even more from a faith perspective. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll get you on again. All the best.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Many thanks to Jason Hanson, longtime kicker with the Detroit Lions, 21 years from 1992 to 2012. And it sounds like he's a pretty private guy. I couldn't find anything on social media regarding Jason Hanson. He doesn't have a Twitter page or an Instagram page and no website or anything like that. So getting him on the podcast, it sounds like he doesn't do a ton of these. So we really do appreciate him coming on and sharing his story and his journey with us here at Sports Spectrum. We also appreciate you for listening, and we appreciate Compassion International for sponsoring this podcast and partnering with us here at Sports Spectrum. A great opportunity for you to release a child from poverty. Over 2 million children have been released from poverty because of the great work being done by Compassion International. Check out the website, compassion.com/sports spectrum. You'll see a list of children there. Pray about it and consider releasing a child from poverty. It's a great time of year to do that, right near the end of the year, getting close to Christmas. Just an awesome time to make a difference in a child's life and release them from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sports spectrum and sponsor a child today. We also want to remind you about our new podcast, Football Sunday. It's coming December 16th, Monday, December 16th. It releases 3 first-person pro football player told stories from the athletes themselves, Trent Dilfer, Brandon Marshall, and Drew Brees, and then 12 episodes total over an 8-week period, culminating with the Monday after the Super Bowl. It's the Football Sunday podcast, brand new from the producers of Sports Spectrum. It's our second podcast, and we're really excited. We want to encourage you. If you like this podcast, you're going to really like the Football Sunday podcast. Each episode is 5 to 10 minutes long. It's a really quick, snackable content, as I like to call it, podcast, an opportunity for you to hear a first-person story of how God worked in the lives of a former or current NFL player. Subscribe today. Football Sunday podcast, everywhere podcasts are found. As always, you can reach us on our social media pages here at Sports Spectrum, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Of course, our YouTube channel as well. An opportunity for you to get all of our content through our social media channels, and also check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time with a new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. Have a great rest of your day.